So what's going on, guys? In the last episode of this series, we covered the main event of the UFC's year. We covered Conor versus Khabib. If you haven't seen that video, it's in the description below. I'll put it at the end of this video for a click-on link if you want to see that episode. It's a really good episode. That was an amazing card. We dedicated an entire episode to recapping that event, the event of the year, easily. So go back and take a look at that episode if you'd like. But we still got some enjoyable fight cards to look at and some pretty notable fighters. So we're going to start by going through a bunch of fight nights, and I think we're going to end this episode with a UFC pay-per-view. So without further ado, let's get straight into this episode. We're getting straight in to UFC Fight Night, Volkan Ozdemir versus Anthony Smith. So the light heavyweight division after Gustafsson, Jones, and DC, it gets kind of cloudy. No real big name contender surfaced until this definite top talent picked up the win. This is Anthony Smith, who is taking on Volkan Ozdemir. Volkan Ozdemir looking to defeat Anthony Smith and return to glory, while Anthony Smith is coming off wins, giving him the sort of legend killer vibe, both coming by KO. Anthony Smith is coming off of 2 KOs, one a big knee over Rashad Evans, and one against Shogun Rua. And no victory on Anthony Smith's record gave him more leverage and was any better than this one for the Lionheart. This one went for 3 brutal rounds. Both found success. Volkan looked better off on the feet, in my opinion. I felt like he had more power and so on and so forth. But on the ground and when the cardio came into play, I thought Smith took the cake. He took it home. He edged it, and he led to the win that he got. It was a seriously good fight. A lot of it, there was actually a good point of time where Volkan was dominating on top, but I thought this was because of the difference on the feet. When it came down to actually getting on the mat, both men tired. Smith looked like he was having an easier time transitioning, and he found the submission. It was a great win for Anthony Smith, and now we're going to get to see Anthony Smith take that #1 contender spot, take a shot at the title against Jon Jones later this year in March, early this year. But in the co-main event, we saw the greatest fighter of internet history, Artem Lobov, taking on replacement Michael Johnson. Johnson missed weight and normally would give up a forfeit percentage of his purse to Artem, but in legendary Artem Lobov status, he gave the 20% back to Michael Johnson. He gave it back to him to pay for the hospital bills he would incur from a fight against the GOAT. Lobov, that was one of the most respectful moments of the year, in my opinion. Johnson was coming in on short notice. He understood that. Artem gave his money back. But the fight didn't go the way in the eyes of the judges as Lobov thought it did. Lobov thought he won. Lobov won the fight. He was only rocked once or twice. He never rocked Michael Johnson, but he was there the entire rounds. The only thing that gives Lobov his disadvantage, he would KO everybody if he had the arms of Jon Jones. Artem Lobov has a chin of steel and some power like granite, but he can't hit anything. His arms are too short. It's funny to watch. But Artem, let's get it. Then we had Misha Cirkunov taking a big win over Patrick Cummins. Canadian picking up a win. The only fight I didn't pick on the main card was this one. I didn't know he was Canadian until I watched this card. You can roast me if you'd like. But nonetheless, he's one of my favorites. I'm going into watching his fight on March 2nd as well. As Anthony Smith, he's fighting March 2nd against OSP. If you guys want to check him out, great light heavyweight. He's coming for the top too. Then we have a sad sort of win. Sukum Hamath picks up a win, sadly. Still reminded of us of how stupid he is. He showed no killer instinct. He hurt Martinez many times. Martinez stepped in on late notice, short notice. And it was just disappointing to see a guy rock a dude so many times and just wrestle him until he got his wits back. And Sukum Hamath won a decision because he rocked him so many times in the first couple rounds. Then we saw John Vellante pick up a controversial finish of Ed Herman. Ed Herman didn't agree with the decision. I'm calling it out in his post-fight press, not his post-fight press conference, his post-fight interview. He calls everybody out. He says, "You judges know nothing," yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to skip over the pay-per-view. I'm going to get on all the fight nights first. We're going to start with UFC Fight Night Magny versus Ponzinibbio. This was the first Argentinian card of 2018. I think it was the first card in UFC history starring an Argentinian-born sensation, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and welterweight gatekeeper. I call him welterweight gatekeeper, but he's a veteran of the division in Neil Magny. And this fight was that one that was seriously positioning Santiago on track of chasing a title. I don't think this put him in line for a shot yet, but he's in that perfect spot to chase a title in 2019 if he were to win a couple more fights. In the main event, Santiago brutalized Magny's legs, stalking him the entire time, and I thought he could have finished him on multiple occasions. I don't think that he was really showing a very, very good killer instinct, but in the end, Santiago proved to me that I guess you can stalk your prey like that, because the finish was brutal. Fourth round, 2 minutes and 36 seconds left. He hits it, and that's his 27th win in the octagon, and he took this situation at home to call out the champion Tyron Woodley, further positioning himself as a close contender for that championship after Colby and Kamaru Usman get their shot. In the co-main event, we saw Ricardo Lamas. Lamas brutalize and damage Darren Elkins, and in one of the moments of the night for me, debuting Johnny Walker, he really made a statement, opened my eyes to who he was. I didn't really know much about him going in, but the way that he finished Khalil Roundtree, who was coming off a finish win over Gokhan Saki, Green, he looks he looks like a green MMA fighter, like a new MMA fighter to the scene, but Walker may play the same role that Adesanya did this year in 2019. Johnny Walker is tall for the division. He looks super fit, super athletic, and he showed off his amazing stand-up, and he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt to put that on top of his striking that he showed in this fight. I'm excited to see where he goes next year. And I even enjoyed his post-fight interview where he was asking the UFC to put him in the video game. It was pretty funny. I'm just warning you guys to keep an eye out for this guy in 2019. He should be on the up-and-coming scale. He should be rising through the ranks of light heavyweight. Then we're going to move on to another one, final. We got the fight night starring rising wrestler Curtis Blades, which actually just happened recently. Wrestling star Curtis Blades was taking on heavy-hitting Francis Ngannou. The card was held in Beijing, China, and started a lot of Chinese fighters taking on different competition from around the world. Two hometown fighters, one on the main card, and Alistair Overeem in the co-main event returned to form with a finish victory in the first, eyeing a rematch with whoever won in the main event. As for the main event, Curtis Blades was favored going in, and the questions were asked, why would Ngannou accept a fight against a wrestler who was so well-versed in what you would call Ngannou's kryptonite, the wrestling game and the cardio game? This being Blades' brutish force. He's so good at wrestling, guys. He'll take you down and he'll smash you out with clean elbows, the way he finished Alistair Overeem, the way he finished he didn't finish Mark Hunt, but he dragged out Mark Hunt. And he's just that fighter that would be the exact thing that you don't want to see Francis Ngannou fight. However, we get to see the main event that only lasted less than, I think it was a minute. Francis making short work, dispersing all the claims that he's lost his power, his mind is off the game. This was a statement that was needed by the Predator. Ngannou finishes him, and now we wait to see him take on yet another wrestler, yet another fighter we're going to doubt Francis Ngannou to beat, because of the fact that Kane's cardio and his wrestling has been proven to be some of the best ever of all time. But the thing is, Ngannou's power can knock anybody clean out with one shot. So I'd be worried. Cain Velasquez, this isn't a good choice for Cain Velasquez coming off of being outside of the octagon for so long. And Ngannou might have a chance to catch Cain, and I don't think Prime Cain is losing to Ngannou. But this Cain Velasquez, returning so sudden, might get clipped. So let's move on to the moment of the year. This was knockout of the year for sure, and it happened on UFC Fight Night, Korean Zombie versus Yair Rodriguez. This card was going to go down in history for the knockout in the main event, where Yair Rodriguez and the Korean Zombie put it all on the line. A fight that was actually extremely entertaining. It tested both man's chins. It tested both man's cardio. It tested both man's striking ability. It tested both man's durability, just legs and limbs wise. This was one that didn't go to the ground very much, and it looked like the Korean Zombie had the fight in the bag by the last 10 seconds of the final round. Then, in the most amazing sequence I have ever seen in my MMA watching history, Yair Rodriguez dodges a Korean Zombie rush. Korean Zombie kind of flails, and he delivers an upstrike elbow that ended the Korean Zombie's night. It was an amazing fight. I wouldn't recommend just going to watch the knockout. You got to watch this whole fight start to finish. It'll add the anticipation. This fight was amazing. It's hard for me to tell you guys. This is a massive spoiler. Go watch this card. I'm going to edit it into this video. I'm going to tell you guys, go watch the main event before you watch this video. It made one of the patented phone recording reactions that I've made. That joins the likes of Khabib versus Conor and Nunes Cyborg. That's the only time I pull out my phone to record a reaction to what we've seen, just to capture that moment. Go watch that as soon as possible. And don't sleep on the other fights on the card. In the co-main event, we had Cowboy taking on Mike Perry in a fight that built itself from a fighter and a gym rivalry. Cowboy had just exited the same gym that Perry had just chose to join. Cowboy cited the fact that they were training Perry, and Cowboy's been a long-time loyal fighter under the gym. And then Winklejohn said that Cowboy didn't even fight at the gym. He fought at his barn. He took fighters from the gym to fight at his barn to train with him. Cerrone started questioning the legitimacy of the gym, letting people off the street come in, pay $100, and just fight. This was an ill will between Cowboy and the gym, and Perry was just kind of in the middle of it. Sadly, in the fight, we didn't get to see a very great strategy set by Winklejohn's team. They didn't preach it enough, I guess. Perry decided to take Cerrone to the ground, where Perry isn't very known to do well. And Cowboy's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, knows all the positions, all the moves. He's shown it in countless bouts where he's won by submission. And in pretty brief fashion, Cowboy submits Perry due to armbar. And I thought that Perry was looking good on his feet. The gym even acknowledges that Perry looked amazing on his feet. It was a weird sequence where Perry took him down, but in the end, Cerrone wins, and Cerrone captures the record for most UFC wins and the most finishes, and also had a feel-good moment with his child in the octagon. It was one of the feel-good moments of 2018. It's just something to talk about. It raises discussions for how good Cowboy Cerrone is, finishing the year with such an historic moment, capturing one of the biggest records in UFC, I'd say. Good for Cowboy Cerrone. Congratulations. And then on the rest of the card, we had Beneil Dariush picking up a win over UFC newcomer not Macy Barber, Jesus Christ. Beneil Dariush picked up a win against a newcomer, and Macy Barber, who made her debut, looks to have a bright future in MMA. She called out Paige Van Zandt. She's a good-looking girl. We'll get to see more of Macy Barber throughout history. So let's end off this video. We're getting pretty deep into this video. If you're still here, thank you guys for watching. But we're going to end today's video with UFC 230, Daniel Cormier versus Derek Lewis. Now, I know this was a pay-per-view event, but the main event was a little bit lacking from the fact that it was such a mismatch wrestling-wise. It felt like they were giving DC another heavyweight victory over another big star. It's coming off of UFC 229, where Derek Lewis has his biggest shine moment to a very big audience. But throughout the rest of the card, there was some surprises, there was some dominance, and there was just some good watches all around. And there was a debuting fighter at a new division that really caught my eye. Let's just talk to the main event. It wasn't worth it's hard to say the main event wasn't worth it because it starred double champ DC, and it's kind of it feels good. It feels good to see greatness, and DC is one of the greats now. But I couldn't say I really enjoyed the circumstances of this fight.
Derek, what's your issue with Daniel? I want to know too.
He disrespected Popeye's chicken on a commercial few years ago.
We had a main event pullout. Nobody could find the main event. They stacked too many cards, I think, for pay-per-views. Like this March 2nd card, they put too much talent on it. They don't disperse it that well, barring because they're expecting injuries. And when injuries start coming, big events start falling. So if you disperse it too much and injuries happen, you get screwed over. But man, it wasn't like we all knew it was going to happen. Cormier took him down. He showed his wrestling. He put it on full assault, taking Lewis down at will. The only time Lewis ever scared DC was when he was just throwing. DC, when Derek Lewis throws a punch, be scared. And they were preaching the fact that anything can happen in MMA. But with DC, I don't think it's a good thing where you can present the fact that anything can happen in MMA. It's more of when they're not as smart as DC. DC's a really smart fighter. I don't think he would have been easy enough to get caught to say that this was going to be one of those times where we see an upset like that. But man, crazier things have happened in the UFC. If it would have happened, it would have been massive. It would have shook the UFC. But we got the result that everyone expected. In the co-main event, this is where I'm talking. This card was good. This card was very, very good. Just the main event was a little bit lacking because it just felt rushed. Now, we had hometown hero Chris Weidman in the co-main event, who took on Jacare Souza. And for some reason, whenever Weidman fights at home, it never goes well for him. It was sad to see him do so well throughout the fight and then get finished in the fashion that he did. Souza showed how awesome he was not to engage the downed opponent. But man, Weidman, it felt like Souza was looking for the big shot. I felt Weidman was doing a great job throughout the fight. He could have had his feel-good win at home, but he just lost at the end. He just got rocked at the end and just got KO'd, and it happens in MMA. And then if you want a heart-wrencher, go take a look at Weidman's sad story on Helwani's show. It just shows that these guys are human. It was a disappointing outcome. I think Weidman's going to come back. He looked great in this fight. It was just he got caught. I'll put the video link in the description to see that interview, and it's a heart-wrenching interview nonetheless. The third fight had short notice. Cannonier. This is the debuting. He's debuting in a new division. He's fought at heavyweight. He fought at light heavyweight. Now he's coming down all the way to middleweight. And he left on a serious high after this win. Cannonier has fought everywhere, and the power that he showed should have told you that if you watched this fight. It felt like he was always threatening. It was against David Branch, and Branch is a really, really good fighter. Branch has some power in himself and a very good jiu-jitsu. He wasn't training as much for a fight against Cannonier. He was training for Jacare Souza, but that fight fell through, so we never got to see that. We never got to see he was training probably his jiu-jitsu game. He wasn't training for a striker like Cannonier. And Cannonier delivered the TKO in the second round, brutal fashion, and put his name on the map in the middleweight division. Finally, on the opener of the card for some reason, we saw rising star, probably rising star of the year, Israel Adesanya dispatch Derek Brunson in ease. I thought with this rivalry and the names that were in this fight, like Israel Adesanya and Brunson, they're really good middleweights. I thought this easily could have been the third fight on the card, but they decided to put two other cards. They had Dominic Reyes fight too. I would have liked to see this probably the third and maybe even the co-main event, but I understand the positioning of Weidman at home. So that's just what happens. But Israel Adesanya making a statement, and he's coming for that belt in 2019. Be ready. But that'll wrap up this episode. It's getting a little bit long. I think we have one more episode left of this series. We have two more pay-per-views to cover, actually. We have Holloway Ortega and then Jones Gustafsson. So we'll touch on that after. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next episode. It's wrapping up now. If you're watching in the day, have a great day. If you're watching at night, have a great night. And that'll do it for me. Peace.